with more than 700 stuffed or otherwise preserved Tasmanian tigers, including 11 alcohol-preserved pouch young specimens, not only in Tasmania and Australia but in museums and universities in as many as 23 countries around the world. The scientists have been working since 1999 to bring the species back to life through genetic engineering. So-called de-extinction, also known as resurrection biology or species revivalism, is the process of generating an organism that either resembles or is an exact extinct species. But the fact that reproducing animals from their genetic material is by no means cheap, and we don't have much experience with it, has long seemed an insurmountable problem. Fortunately, a newly formed American biotechnology company has just managed to overcome the obstacles of funding and refining genetic engineering methods with high tech. In August 2022, it was announced that this company, in partnership with some Australian scientists, would attempt to recreate the Tasmanian tiger within a projected timeframe of just over 10 years. They have managed to extract DNA from 108-year-old remains preserved in the Victoria Museum. From this they have constructed, or more correctly sequenced, the entire genome of the species. To fill in some of the gaps in the structure of the extracted DNA caused by age-related degradation, they relied on the genomes of other dasyurids as models. Members of the diverse family Dasyuridae, commonly known as marsupial carnivores, are the closest living relatives of the Tasmanian tiger. There are 71 recognized species in this family, excluding a few that have probably gone extinct recently. The spotted quoll, also commonly called the tiger quoll, was long assumed to be the tiger's closest evolutionary cousin of all the dasyurids, but we now know that it is actually the little-known fat-tailed dunnart, a cuddly marsupial that looks like a pale-colored mouse. Although it is still 70 million years evolutionarily divergent from the Tasmanian tiger and has a body mass almost 1,000 times smaller than it, this critter will play a key role in the process of de-extinction of its relative. Scientists will use gene editing technology to closely match the dunnart's DNA to that of the tiger. They will then insert the modified Tasmanian tiger cell nucleus into a fat-tailed dunnart egg. This will create an embryo that, due to the correction of gaps using genomes from other species, will not be 100% original Tasmanian tiger, but will be extremely close. The embryo will then be implanted into a surrogate mother. After a gestation period of about 40 days, the female fat-tailed dunnart will give birth to the genetically engineered offspring, but as she will be unable to care for them due to the size difference, they will be raised by biologists. Once these joeys, which is the common name for the young of all marsupial species, are grown and ready to survive, they will be reintroduced into selected areas of Tasmania and probably wider Australia. This will undoubtedly be the best thing that has ever been achieved for the protection of Tasmania's fragile wilderness. Throughout the time of its existence, the Tasmanian tiger played an extremely important role in the food chain as an exclusively carnivorous predator. But since its disappearance, ecosystems have suffered a drastic loss of biodiversity and overall degradation. That's because the absence of an apex predator triggers a process known as trophic downgrading. This leads to ecological problems in the populations of other creatures. The most famous example is the rampant spread of the Tasmanian devil facial tumor disease, which is driving the species to the brink of extinction. The fatal disease was first spotted in 1986, and only in the 2 decades since has the devil's population plummeted by 80 to 90%. Other marsupials such as wallabies and wombats are also at risk, suffering and dying from infectious mange. The decline of these native species has created more favorable conditions for invasive species such as the European rabbit, ferret, red fox, wild boar, feral cat, and many others. Not to mention that the changing abundance of herbivorous marsupials means an overgrowth of plants. This is reflected in the prevalence of yellowing, dry and dead plants, making the landscape look increasingly barren and extremely vulnerable to deadly large-scale wildfires. All of this is due to the lack of a carnivorous supervisor that would prevent the spread of diseases and maintain the health of the populations by removing sick and weak animals. So, the return of the Tasmanian tiger would mean a gradual return to ecological balance and the recovery of ecosystems across the island. but this comeback cannot be delayed for too long. Despite our current conservation efforts, the question is how long this vulnerable unique environment will remain in a repairable state. So let us hope that the biotechnologists have been as accurate as possible in their predictions and that in just over a decade, perhaps exactly in 2036, we will be able to welcome the birth of the most eagerly awaited and important joeys of all time. Surely this would be the best way to mark 100 years since the passing of Benjamin, the most maltreated, the most enduring, the most celebrated, the greatest Tasmanian tiger that ever lived, but above all, the symbol of all the world's overhunted species, and an eternal reminder of what monsters we humans can be.